That's why we have campaigns called Reclaim the Streets for Women and Not for Men.
Hello, non-resident parents. Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at something slightly different. Good Morning Britain delivers the gold once again. Do we need a men's minister? Now, the problem I can see is this. Do they really give a damn about us having a men's minister? I don't know. Let's have a look and listen.
Conservative MP has come under fire for suggesting men are being failed by society and need a minister dedicated to championing their causes.
Speaking on BBC Radio 4 Women's Hour, Nick Fletcher said the role would deal with specific health problems that men face and try to improve their life chances. He suggested the minister would mirror that of the existing cabinet role for women.
So do we really need a minister for men? We're joined now by journalist and broadcaster Henry Bonsu and the Conservative MP who made that comment, Nick Fletcher. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us. So, Nick, if we can start with you first, because it's created quite a stir, this idea of yours. Obviously, we know we have a women's minister or minister for equalities, and you feel it's about time we had one for men.
Yes, I do. I believe we are letting men down. The statistics out there are terrible for men at the moment. 13 men a day are taking their life by suicide. 88 men are dying each day with heart disease. 33 men a day are dying with prostate cancer. We've got boys failing at school, lagging behind girls at every level. 35,000 less boys going to university than schools. If these statistics were the other way around, and there'd be an absolute outcry over it. So, yeah, I do believe that we need a minister for men.
And isn't he correct about that? Now, if there were stats that represented women saying that there were health concerns across every single level, educationally and opportunities, it would be a national scandal.
Quite compelling statistics there, Henry, with regards to what Nick's saying, but you don't agree?
No, I don't, Ben. I mean, I'm just wondering which men Nick is really concerned about, because when you look at wealth, influence and power in the society, from the Prime Minister and MPs downwards, the judiciary...
This guy immediately setting up a power dynamic. Where can we see that? Where can we see this Marxist separation of those who are in power and those who are oppressed? Where do we see that in society? Let me think.
The judiciary, the captains of industry, business, the armed forces, everything is dominated by men. It's always been that way. That's why we've needed not 1, 2, 3, but now 4 waves of...
So who is this person who has these seemingly woke and feminist ideas? Well, Henry Bonsu is a 38-year-old director and presenter on Colourful Radio, the new speech-based digital station aimed at Europe's African and Caribbean communities, perhaps best known as the Mad Axe for being too intellectual. He has been a journalist since 1990, working on BBC radio and TV programmes, including Today, World of One, Public Eye and Black Britain. For 2 years, he anchored the Dry Time news programme on BBC, London 94.9, interviewing leading politicians, business people and celebrities. He has written for The Times, The Mail, The Sunday, The Daily Express, The Voice, The Nation, Prime Magazine, The London and Evening Standard. So he clearly needs to remain on the bankroll with them, and hence the truck coming out of his mouth doesn't seem too intellectual to me, just grabbing at any historical narrative that seems to remotely feel patriarchal.
Feminism for women to be able to catch up. Let's remember, 100 or so years ago, women were throwing themselves in front of the king's horse at the Derby in order to say, votes for women. If it hadn't been...
Yeah, but what he's not telling you is that most of the women who were given the opportunity to have the vote didn't want it because they didn't want to have to go to war. That's what he's neglecting to tell you there.
For the First World War, that we would not have had universal adult suffrage. Women are still being killed by men every week, about 2 to 3. We hear about women suffering, can't even walk freely in the streets at night. That's why we have campaigns called Reclaim the Streets for Women and Not for Men. So, Nick, I do understand that there are issues with certain groups.
Yeah, and as I was growing up, even as a man, I was told to be careful about going down the streets where there was a reputation for things to happen to you. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a female. If you go into a neighborhood which has high levels of crime, then you are likely to be an unsafe individual. But I agree also that there needs to be more safety on the streets at night for men and women.
with certain groups of young men who've been alienated and left behind, perhaps in constituencies like yours, which have been hollowed out since the Thatcher revolution of the 80s. But for men in society as a whole, I think you're barking up the wrong tree.
Nick, that is a point, isn't it? That the fight's been on to try and equalise. Why specifically would it be helpful when we're so concerned about safety for women on the streets? Why would it be helpful to have a Minister for Men to prioritise specifically male issues?
I think there are many issues that men suffer with are due to the fact that they are being left behind, and they feel that they're being left behind. They don't feel valued. Civitas have just done a report and said that 41% of 16 to 18-year-old boys or young men have been told that they're a problem society. We're expecting them to fail before they even start, and when we expect them to fail, then obviously they're going to end up not in a good place. Many young men have turned to crime because of this. And as I say, if we look after men, then we get a happier society for everybody.
So let's look at the stats. Women are much more likely to go to university than men, and have been for many years. They also are more likely to complete their studies and gain a first or upper second class degree. However, after graduation, men are more likely to be in highly skilled employment or further study just after graduation. More females than males made up the overall student population of 57%, and females made up a greater share of every level, including a PhD level, in which 50.3% of students were female, or just over 600 more females, where previous years there were more males. Check out my video on how the Istanbul Convention actively discriminates against men and boys across nations as political, governmental, education, and across the system to prevent men and boys thriving under the propaganda of female rights. This research was carried out by Sally Ann Burris from Split the Difference. In the second quarter of 2023, the unemployment rate for men in the United Kingdom was 4.4%. while for women it was 3.9%. The male unemployment rates seen in late 2020 were the highest since 2015, while rates for women reached heights last seen in 2016. The Office for National Statistics published suicide data for England. 5,219 suicides were registered in 2021, that is 307 more than in 2020. The overall suicide rate was 10.5 per 100,000 compared to 10 per 100,000 in 2020 and 10.8 per 100,000 in 2019. The male suicide rate was 15.8 per 100,000 compared to a female suicide rate of 5.5 per 100,000. Males aged 50 to 54 were found to have the highest suicide rate, 22.5 per 100,000. There is regional variation in the suicide rate. 77% of men polled have suffered with common mental health symptoms like anxiety, stress, or depression. 40% of them have never spoken to anyone about their mental health, and 29% of those haven't done so say they are too embarrassed to speak about it, while 20% say there is a negative stigma on the issue. And the biggest cause of mental health issues in men's lives are work at 32%, their financing at 31%, and their health at 23%. 40% of them polled said it would take thoughts of suicide or self-harm to compel them to seek professional help, which is absolutely crazy. I had a little look online and I found rather quickly that for women there are over a whopping 102 agencies across England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales, and they are specifically geared to supporting women around domestic violence, finances, women and children's shelters, legal support and various interconnected and overlapping support spheres. Whereas there is about 12 to 15 support groups across England, Scotland and Wales that are geared towards men, which is really sad. In terms of female reproductive choices, birth control methods vary far and wide, and there's methods for nearly everybody and lifestyle. In fact, there are about 12 to 18 methods in total, and counting is going up every single year. Traditional methods for male contraception have long included, you ready for this? Abstinence, condoms, and vasectomy. Yeah, the responsibility for pregnancy is firmly placed on men's feet, although women have virtually complete control over becoming pregnant and then impunity in killing the child before it even arrives.
Necessarily mean just because men's needs are being promoted that has to kind of go against women's rights and the right for female equality, does it?
I don't see why it needs to be either. You're looking at female issues, female rights, female progression in society. That means that you can't look at men's. Or if you're looking at men's rights, men's issues, men's progression in society, you're neglecting somehow women's rights, women's issues. I don't see why there can't be a dual conversation about this in society where men and women both have opportunity and protection and right.
For instance, sometimes being vulnerable and feeling powerless can lead to violence.
Yeah. Indeed, yes. But this is not a zero-sum game. There are some men out there, I'm not sure if you're one of them, Nick, who see every advancement for women as a threat against them. You know, we talk about Homo sapiens, wise man. Ever since human beings, early modern humans, stood on their hind legs in the east of Africa 200,000 years ago, it's all been about men. Look at the great religions, you know, Islam, Judaism, Christianity. It's all written by men from the perspectives of men, and we've used that to keep women suppressed. And it's only in the last 50 or so.
I think that you look at societies across the history and you'll realize that actually there were definite needs for men and women to hold different roles because of childbirth, because men were stronger, because they were able to do more in terms of that physical strength in order to provide for the family. This was about survival for men and women across the ages.
Press, and it's only in the last 50 or 60 years, since bra burning and advancement of women, often driven by activism on the streets and outside, that women have made progress.
And isn't it wonderful that women have been able to have liberation in modern society because of the things that men have done? Building houses, building infrastructure, building legislation so that women can actually have more rights, to have more freedoms. Isn't that wonderful what men have done and enabled for women throughout society?
It hasn't necessarily been governments. Governments have just rubber-stamped it by the Equal Pay at Work Act and other bits of legislation, but it's come from women. And you know what's really helped them, Nick, is having a purpose, having something to kick against. You know, people said, women, you should be secretaries. You know, you should be nurses. You should only be teachers. But then we had the
I don't think there's anything wrong in being a teacher or a police officer, a middling income, which you are serving the community in which you live. Also teaching the next generation so that they can go on and produce in their lives is highly valuable. This guy is undermining what we see as the bedrock work in our community.
Solution of those feminists who said women should be scientists, should be doctors, should be police officers. And that's what's given them the drive and the energy. And perhaps you may say, in my constituency, there are young men who are struggling. Let's find them a purpose. I don't think it's going to come from some kind of, minister.
Nick?
I think we can have two thoughts at the same time. I think it's really important that we've got a Secretary of State for Women and Equalities. I think it's really important that we've got a Minister in Maria Caulfield for Minister for Women. She's doing some wonderful things. But as I say, we can have two thoughts at the same time. We need a Minister for Men. We are failing men. And anyone who doesn't agree with this needs to go and speak to the families of the 5,000 men this year that will take their lives.
Can I ask you,
They
Nick?
want to go and speak
Nick,
to the mums. No, you've had your say. You need to go and speak to the mums of the young boys who've been caught by the local drug dealer, who are now hooked on drugs and their lives are in absolute turmoil. We need to go and speak to these parents. We need to go and speak to the brothers. They need to speak to the sisters and the mothers of these boys that we are failing. We need to do something about it. It doesn't mean to say that we can't continue to press women forward. Why shouldn't we? I've got a son and a daughter. I want them both to do equally as well. They are letting down society by letting down our men. And a Minister for Men will bring this all together, shine a light on all the issues, and hopefully we can turn the lives of many young men around.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. It's a very fertile debate, Nick and Henry. Thank you very much for joining us. Lots of you getting in touch with us, actually, which I think is really interesting. And Zampa says she would agree with the Minister for Men. Maybe that it could be made possible to have prostate checks on the NHS, like you have a mammogram or a smear test. Prostate cancer is the biggest killer of men. They don't have routine checks. They have to go to the GP first.
Although on the flip side, Sammy says actually women's issues, health issues, have been poorly researched. And actually, that's why women's health needs an extra priority. So, but it's an interesting idea, isn't it? Whether having a minister for something makes a difference in that way.
Yeah, I really felt the genuineness of Lance words there on the issue. Anyway, what do you think? Do we need to have a men's minister? Do you think it's important that men's issues are pushed forward in society? Look at the stats. Look at the vast disparity between men and women across all levels: education, attainment, work, etc., life choices. Also, what about fertility choices? For me, it does seem that there needs to be something discussed a little bit further in the social forum when it comes to men's issues. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video.